I don't know much about mental health, and I would bet many gamers are in a similar position. My experiences are only through other games, movies, and works of art, instead of a scientific understanding of the issue or a personal story with someone who is affected by it. It makes telling stories about these kinds of struggles very difficult, which may be why we haven't seen many games tackle the subject material in a significant way. Sure, lots of horror games throw in patients inside of a mental hospital, but Ninja Theory's next third-person action game flips the script, instead putting the player in the shoes of Senua, a Celtic girl who is struggling with psychosis. The developer's message before the game starts makes it clear that this journey, the story of Senua's sacrifice, is a tale that will look at this issue of mental health in a serious, significant way. An introspection into the mind of a character that is broken and hopeless and angry, but also a character that is able to overcome both the psychological and physical trials, and not by magically being cured or having to sacrifice her life in order to end the suffering. Senua's journey is about grief and acceptance, and the game tackles the issue of mental health in unpredictable and clever ways, all through the very young medium of video games. And that might be the most impressive aspect of Hellblade, to intertwine its story with the design of the game, creating an adventure wherein the player and Senua are linked in every way, empathizing with her struggles at one point and at another, bathing in the glory of her victory, the player's victory. But before we discuss the story, in light of the medium it is told in, it's important to understand the character of Senua and the background that influenced her design and the struggles she has to deal with. The developers at Ninja Theory have talked about doing a lot of research into the old European tales about the afterlife and the mental anguish that those who would find themselves in hell would have to deal with. This is where Senua's story originates. The developers came to learn that the Celts had a very interesting perspective on mental disorder. Celts, with a G, were those who were driven mad by a curse or an intense amount of grief. This becomes the background of Senua's story, as those ancient Celts would then take to a life in the woods, seeking penance, and beginning the journey that would lead up to the events of the game. Senua becomes a Celt after she develops psychosis, which has to do with the mental breakdown of objective reality. The developers spoke to psychiatrists and professors to get a better understanding of the condition.
Psychosis is a descriptive term, and it refers to having a loss of contact with objective reality. So it's characterized by two main sets of symptoms. One of them is hallucinations, where somebody experiences perceptions when there is no actual objective thing out there to perceive. And the other is delusions, where somebody comes to very often bizarre, unpleasant, frightening beliefs when there's no good evidence in favor of them.
The game is full of these breakdowns in reality, where the player observes Senua's slow descent into total grief. The developers' attention to detail and willingness to recreate real-life symptoms of psychosis makes for an almost grounded affair. This might look like a fantasy world to most, but they are realistic worlds and made-up realities. They are real to the people that have the condition in such a way. Hellblade is steeped in this realism, even with its fantastical setting. But how is Senua's journey wrapped up? While I expected either death or a magically happy ending to Senua's journey, the developers take an alternative approach, a realistic approach, allowing the Celtic warrior the chance to let go of Dillion, the man whose soul she tries to save, while also living with all the voices in her head.
Only to return to the sea.
There is no hour of victory or defeat for Senua, and that ending is perfect for the story that Ninja Theory is trying to tell. Again, a realistic approach in a fantasy setting that is all too real for some people. What Hellblade does for the proliferation of these types of stories is anybody's guess, but it begins a conversation and introduces a topic to the gaming sphere that has otherwise been largely ignored. While games like The Last of Us and the original BioShock had a huge effect when it came to the importance of storytelling in games, Hellblade instead focuses on the importance of telling a specific aspect of a story, a grounded narrative dealing with mental illness head-on. But Hellblade goes one step further, interweaving the design of the game with the subject matter of the story. The infamous term ludonarrative dissonance comes to mind, the conflict between a video game's story and its gameplay. instead of working harmoniously together to create a consistent design philosophy. Many games will break the immersion as the mechanical tools the player is given are not fit for the story that's being told. The 2013 Tomb Raider reboot is a great example, introducing a character that has never killed anybody in her life, only for the player to take control and slaughter an entire island's worth of evil bad guys. Hellblade's story and gameplay, however, could not be any more harmonious. Senua's psychosis is the basis of every action the player takes. Her shattered mind creates anomalies in space-time that the player has to line up in order to access the next part of the level. The voice hearing that Senua has to deal with, not only does it provide story details as the player makes their way to hell, it also acts as an aid when in combat, as the voices warn the player of enemies that are about to strike them from behind. And finally, the aspect of psychosis that is involved with the puzzle design, delusions and patterns in the game world that Senua must link together to move forward.
There's another aspect of psychosis that is much harder to explain, but one that I think video games are uniquely able to represent, which are often called delusions.
People begin to see patterns in the world. They begin to link things that most people wouldn't link. Most of the things that we might think would be coincidence or not worth commenting on. Nevertheless, that might have a particular salience or importance for them.
One individual described how everyday words, sounds, colours and objects were steeped in meaning to him, forming a strange and sinister puzzle that he was determined to solve but could not quite get to the bottom of.
Hellblade is more than just a great introspection into a deep character. It's an important game, one that may finally push other developers to tackle serious subjects in their games. If video games are to grow out of simple stories, or ones that are not controversial and don't attempt to tackle anything of meaning or relevance, then it will only make the medium lag further behind that of novels and film. This evolution is necessary and will only result in better games with better stories.